Today we're going to be diving into a topic that's as essential as your morning cup of chai. Water purity. How good for us exactly is this glass of water? Water usually contains a mix of substances that most of the time you can't actually see. Some are of course good for you. You have, for example, certain beneficial bacteria or minerals like calcium and magnesium. And sometimes in that water, there's the obviously bad, like disease-causing microbes or harmful toxins.
So it's the fight for those bad parts that we are increasingly seeing households and workplaces around us install water purifier systems. A recent survey found that 97% of the households in India purify their water in some form or the other, and a mammoth chunk of them are actually using ROs, about 44% of them. That's because RO, or reverse osmosis as it's called, systems have become somewhat of go-to of fighting water hardness inside households. Hard water, which is high in calcium and magnesium, frequently is also distributes to higher or also contributes in a way to higher TDS, and a high TDS or a total dissolved substances is a problem that plagues the country. Right now, it's going on in several metros, Noida, Jaipur, Chennai, even Mumbai for that matter. ROs have become one-stop shop to fix such problems and water problems, because even if high TDS is not sometimes directly harmful to your health, it can mean your water comes with a sort of a strange taste and even smell.
Increasingly, experts are saying you have to be careful because sometimes even your RO can be overzealous. So what that means is that you can end up stripping away essential minerals like calcium and magnesium from the water sometimes, which are actually good for your health. A good example or a metaphor is, imagine you're washing your hands, but you end up washing them for too long and you scrub away some of your natural oils. But how prevalent is this actually as a problem? Is this exaggerated? Should we stick to our trusty ROs if we can afford them? Or should we look at other filtration options, the organic options that are used everywhere in smaller towns, sometimes villages, or even other technology like UV purifiers or activated carbon filters?
So enough of us talking, let's go straight to experts now and ask them, should you RO, should you not RO, how do they filter their own water, and what kind of situations, kind of substances you should really be keeping in mind when you use filtered water at home. Let's bring in our first guest on that. We have to check the water, India drinks and brings you an overall picture. We've got Dr. Atul with us. He's a principal scientist at the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, National Environment Engineering Research Institute. It's a long name, and I'm sure he's doing a lot of those things over there. Dr. Atul, firstly, you've done a study for almost 4,000 different spots across the country, and these were largely a mix of samples that you picked up from groundwater, and these are community ROs that you really looked at. What were your basic findings? Did you see that ROs basically were stripping away even the essentials?
Yes, our observation is also same. The people set the TDS level of say around 50, and it reduced down the mineral concentration. Obviously, in addition to that, it also reduced down the pH level in the water. If it is not remineralized, then it reduces down the pH level. Sometimes it is below 6.0. But as per drinking water standard, the pH of drinking water is supposed to be 6.5 to 8.5. And once it get reduced down below 6.5, it started being acidic, and it probably have some health hazards.
Doctor, as Sonal was just saying, the largest study you conducted was focused mainly on a mix of groundwater samples, community ROs, but you have studied some individual samples of home ROs too. But are there comprehensive studies of different home RO brands across the country, for example?
I am not aware about this study, and why someone will study all the things. But yes, nowadays people are trying to study, even though few researchers are trying to study the health hazards of RO treated water in the long term basis. So few studies are going on. but I don't think, and it's a time-taking process because studying health hazards is quite a time-taking process. So it will take some time.
Sure. Okay. So, Dr. Atul, tell us what were your biggest takeaways then from the study that you did conduct? These are in community ROs, we understand.
Our takeaway is that around 45% of water is being wasted as a reject water. The TDS of the water is too low, treated water is too low, and the socio-economic aspect have not been considered while installing the units, and that's what the cost which is required for the running entire unit is not being earned by the person who are handling these entire units. So obviously, with time, these units will get shut down because of the recurring expenses required to operate the.
Okay. Doctor, tell us, so many organizations say that your TDS, your total dissolved substances, let me just remind our audiences, that needs to fit in a certain number. What is your recommendation when it comes to that?
Basically, we also favored the TDS of around say 200 to 300 mg per liter. It barely have some minerals concentration, and if the TDS is between 200 and 300, the pH is being getting managed, and it will remain in the neutral range. So that is what I personally is my personal say observation, or say recommendation, that the TDS should be within 200 to 300 mg.
Right. And those standards, if everybody is watching, please quickly take pictures and sort of screenshots also when we keep popping those graphics for you to check the levels. But talking about checking the levels, Dr. Atul, the thing these days is, because when people, they're too aware, they all end up buying TDS meters. Would you prescribe that?
Nothing wrong in measuring TDS and all these things. The only thing is that the TDS meter should be calibrated by using some laboratory or somewhere where they get it. So first calibrate your TDS, and then you can measure the TDS level in the water. It's a good thing that if awareness, people are aware about all the things and they are measuring the TDS. And I again like to recommend that the TDS is supposed to be in between 200 to 300 mg.
Okay, doctor, thank you for joining us. Thank you for bringing us some data from your study too. Let's now speak to a different doctor. This is Dr. Anil Arora. And Dr. Arora sees the adverse effects of bad water every day because he's the head of gastroenterology at the Sri Gangaram Hospital. So we thought we'd see the other side of all of this. Let's just go over to him with our first question. Doctor, can our audiences tell, because there are two issues here. One is when your TDS is too high, one when it's too low. Can our audiences tell in a manner just by looking when the water TDS is too high?
Yeah, there are very simple, subtle signs. If you are observant, if you are an astute person who can easily look at what is happening around, whenever there is a dry scum on your utensils or the glassware, so this is the time, even after washing, this dry scum does not disappear. Whenever there is a scaling of the pipes or the faucets which are present on the surface of your sanitary material, and whenever your skin is dry and itching after taking the bath, these are the subtle ways by which you can realize that the water which is coming in contact with you, or water with which you have taken a bath, possibly was harder than what is recommended for day-to-day use.
Right. But doctor, tell us this, if too hard water is a problem, so is too soft. And when you use an RO, it's also sometimes, we've talked about, the previous guest spoke about too much water wastage, of sometimes stripping off even the essential sort of minerals over there. Are there similar signs in a way one can tell of if the water is too soft as well?
Unfortunately, there is no way by looking at the water or by looking at the utility of the things in your surrounding areas to say whether the TDS is very low than what is expected. That's not possible. But if it is too high, on the contrary, then it will manifest as a dry scum, or biofilm which is attached, or you will have a clogging of the of your filters repeatedly. But if it is too low, that means it is an extra clean water that your eyes cannot judge between a normal and an extra clean water. Unfortunately, the reverse osmosis technique is so strong that it will suck out all the even useful minerals from your water. But by naked eye examination, you cannot make out the difference between too soft a water, as you had put in, versus the normal water, which should be allowed to be used for drinking.
And doctor, this kind of water, so water that might be stripped away of its essential minerals, are there long-term studies at all that show what the manifestations, the health manifestations of that kind of water can be on our bodies?
In fact, the answer to that will lie in a scientific study which is done on prospective basis. That means you take a 1 lakh population which takes an extra soft water, that means water which is totally devoid of the dissolved substances, and the water which is potable, that which has a limited TDS which is available to it. If you follow them up over a period of 5 to 10 years, that prospective study can tell you. But unfortunately, there is none for me to quote to give you an answer in yes or no. But there is a good retrospective data, especially from the Scandinavian countries, in which the epidemiologists have realized that after the induction of the RO, 5 years down the lane in a particular community, they have observed higher incidence of the bone abnormalities, including repeated falls and repeated and higher incidence of the fractures, thereby concluding indirectly that maybe if the water contain too low substance TDS or calcium and minerals, then you're more likely to have weaker brittle bones. But that is the indirect.
I see, but doctor, then the only way perhaps is to understand if the levels are balanced in your house, correct? So how does one ensure that happens? How do we ensure that the water that we're actually doing or drinking is not too harsh or not, completely stripped off, not doing anything to the body?
The biggest concern is the acquisition of the infection, hepatitis A, hepatitis E, typhoid, and other contaminants like dysentery and the bacterial protozoal infection. Boiling is the cheapest way of having a good water which will get rid of all infection. Boiling is something which will kill bacteria, viruses, fungi, and any damn thing, any living organism. It may give you alteration in taste. So what we do at home, after having filtered water, we boil it, and that boiled contents are stored in the refrigerator, which we drink. So that is the surest way of getting away from infection. My concern is more of having infection from the governmental water supply rather than worrying about the TDS.
Okay, so boiling, that's an interesting takeaway. Doctor, tell us, you did say you filter the water, then you boil it. So if it's not, too cheeky to ask, what kind of filter are you using at home? Are you using an RO, for example?
We are using an ultraviolet filter, which is not as potent as RO. RO is a different technology. It's called reverse osmosis. There are three more things which are disadvantages in using RO. First of all, it uses a lot of electricity. We in developed countries have to take care of it. Secondly, it is a very slow process. And thirdly, after filtering the virus, a major chunk of the water which has been filtered goes waste, something which does not occur in ultraviolet filtration or something like AquaGuard. So they are better ways of preserving the water. That is the reason, even WHO says, look at the TDS. If TDS is more than 500, use RO. If it is between less than 200, you don't need anything. If it is between 200 to 300, you can use an ultraviolet filtration.
That's interesting. So your choice is clearly out there in terms of whether to RO or not to RO. But for those, but also perhaps there is a bit of a technicality here, depends on the quality of water being supplied and thus matching it with the kind of equipment required. But tell us this, doctor, long usage of RO, do you see impact of that? Any anecdotal reference that you have from patients who come to you?
See, again, I'll come back to the question with which you had started with. What I have seen as observation over a period of time, I am in the medical profession practicing gastroenterology for almost 35 years. Now, if you have been having RO water, possibly you are not exposed to infection in the early childhood. I'll give you a classical example. Suppose my child gets selected in a medical entrance exam or in an IIT and goes to a hostel for study. See, he has been having a protective atmosphere at home. You have been having UV filter, you boil water, and you have never been let him be exposed to the routine contaminants of Indian soil. But once the child goes to a hostel, then if this child at the age of 18 or 20, when he's joining a medical college or an engineering college, he'll be exposed to the contaminants which he had not been exposed in the early childhood. We have seen young children coming down with water-acquired infection late in the childhood, late in the early 20s or in the late teen age. So these infection, if they occur in the early age group, they will not cause problem. But if they occur in adulthood, they cause problem. So in fact, that is the flip side of having too clean a water.
All right then, the flip side of having too clean water, also the other side of not having clean water in middle of when news channels are filled with water crisis issues. There's clearly a lot to be discussed and a lot to be looked into while we discuss this. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us here on TVC. But